This next story is a chilling missing persons tale that comes from the state of Oregon. Some national park disappearances have explanations: storms, wrong turns, accidents. But on Deadwood Ridge, deep in the Pacific Northwest, what happened was far darker and disturbing. So before we move on, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more stories like these. In the summer of 1997, two hikers vanished without a trace. Search teams found their campsite destroyed, their gear abandoned, but no sign of them. For years, the case was filed away as just another missing persons mystery in the wilderness. Until evidence surfaced. Evidence that suggests their disappearance was not an accident. Evidence that points to something inhuman in those woods. This is more than just an unsolved missing 411 case. It's a true horror story, a disturbing account of hikers vanishing in the forest, of paranormal encounters, of Bigfoot evidence covered up, a story of eerie witness accounts, unsettling clues, and the terrifying possibility that something ancient and predatory stalks the shadows of America's national parks. Welcome to one of the most chilling unsolved disappearances you've never heard of. Daniel Whitaker was 29 years old, a software engineer from Portland, Oregon. Colleagues described him as sharp-minded, the kind of person who could troubleshoot a coding problem for hours without breaking focus. He was logical, analytical, and a self-described skeptic, someone who prided himself on finding rational explanations for strange phenomena. Yet, Daniel carried a quiet fascination with national park disappearances and the so-called missing 411 cases. He consumed books and late-night radio shows about paranormal mysteries, but he laughed them off as superstition, campfire stories for bored hikers. To him, the unexplained was just science that hadn't been solved yet. Outside of work, Daniel's life revolved around the outdoors. He was a dedicated hiker, a weekend backpacker, and an amateur photographer. His friends joked that he had more photos of Oregon's forests than of actual people. What drew him most was the silence of the wilderness, the way you could walk for miles and feel like the last human on Earth. Elena Price, at 27, was almost Daniel's opposite. A graduate student in environmental science at the University of Oregon, she was known for her passion, her curiosity, and her tendency to chase the extraordinary. Where Daniel was analytical, Elena was intuitive, sometimes even spiritual. She believed the forests of the Pacific Northwest held secrets that science could not explain. Her friends said she lived with one foot in the world of academia and the other in folklore. She volunteered with conservation groups, studied ecosystems, and hiked extensively. But she also collected native oral histories and cryptid legends, piecing them together like puzzle fragments of a forgotten past. She was particularly fascinated by stories of giants, shadow people, and the being some tribes called the Tall One. Unlike Daniel, Elena didn't laugh at the possibility of cryptids. She believed that the wilderness was old enough, deep enough, to hide things modern eyes rarely glimpsed. Her journals were filled with sketches of plants, notes on habitats, and the occasional eerie entry. What if myths are just memories carried through time? The two first crossed paths at a university lecture on cryptozoology and wilderness folklore. Their arguments afterward were instant, Daniel dismissing Bigfoot as bad science, Elena countering with the weight of countless first-hand accounts. But that clash of personalities sparked something else, a bond built on respect, curiosity, and a shared love of the wild. Soon, they began hiking together on weekends, testing each other's limits on Oregon's toughest trails. Their trip to Deadwood Ridge wasn't a random choice. Elena had spent months digging into old reports of strange sightings in the Siskiyou wilderness. She'd found fragments of native accounts describing a towering, shadowy figure that moved silently through the trees. Local loggers had whispered similar tales in the 1960s, stories of something stalking them after dark. Daniel agreed to join her, not because he believed, but because he wanted to debunk it once and for all. To him, it was an adventure, a chance to prove the old stories were just that, stories. For Elena, it was an opportunity to gather research, maybe even stumble upon something that could bridge folklore and reality. They told their families it would be a simple weekend hike, 2 days, light packs, an easy trail with plenty of time to return home. No one thought twice. but Daniel and Elena never came back. Deadwood Ridge lies within the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, a region already known for its rugged beauty and unforgiving isolation. But Deadwood Ridge is different. It's the kind of place locals don't talk about unless you press them. The land itself seems wrong. Dense pine and Douglas fir stretch so close together that sunlight can't break through, leaving even midday hikers stumbling through shadows like twilight. The canopy muffles sound, creating an eerie silence where even birds seem reluctant to sing. The air feels heavy, damp with moss and rot, and many hikers have described the sensation of being smothered, like the forest is swallowing them whole. Sharp, jagged rock formations jut out of the ground like broken teeth, their surfaces scarred with cracks and strange discolorations. Some bear ancient petroglyphs, faint but still visible, depicting towering humanoid figures with elongated limbs and staring eyes. No one knows who carved them. Archaeologists avoid speculation. Locals just shake their heads. But what unsettles most isn't the land you can see. It's what people say happens when you spend too much time there. Native tribes who once lived in the surrounding valleys refused to camp overnight on Deadwood Ridge. They described it as a place where the forest listens and something walks when you stop walking. Their oral traditions warned of the Tall One, a shadow being said to hunt those who linger too long. Loggers in the 1920s spoke of eerie screams echoing through the trees. Some reported returning to camp to find tools bent or twisted, as if something had deliberately tampered with them. Others simply walked off the job, claiming they weren't alone out there. Disappearances are woven into the ridge's history. Hikers have been reported missing as far back as the 1940s. Some were never found. Others were discovered days later, wandering in circles, clothes torn, unable to explain what happened, only that they felt hurted by something unseen. Navigating the ridge is a nightmare. Fog drifts in suddenly, rolling between trees and cutting visibility to nothing. Even experienced rangers have admitted to losing their bearings in minutes. Radios fail. Rangers nicknamed it the Dead Zone, a place where signals die, batteries drain, and even compasses spin as though caught in magnetic currents. At night, temperatures plunge unexpectedly. Campers have reported waking with frost on their tents in the middle of summer. No one has explained why this pocket of wilderness carries its own climate. The forest itself feels alive. Search teams have written in their logs about hearing knocks on trees, always 3 in a row, repeating from different directions. Others describe the unnerving impression that the forest shifts subtly when you're not looking, as if the paths you walked minutes before no longer exist. Secrets buried in the ridge. Some of the darkest stories come from unofficial ranger accounts. Whispers of finding massive footprints that vanish mid-trail, of claw marks etched 10 feet high into tree trunks, of caves littered with animal bones arranged in unnatural patterns. One ranger, long retired, claimed in a taped interview that Deadwood Ridge was the only place he'd ever refused to finish a search. His exact words, "That forest doesn't want us there. It hides what it wants to keep." Another spoke of a cabin deep in the ridge, boarded up decades ago. Inside, they found journals describing weeks of terror, heavy footsteps circling at night, laughter without a source, shadows that stretched too far. That cabin was supposedly burned down after the report, but locals say the charred foundation still exists if you dare to look. Deadwood Ridge is more than just wilderness. It's a graveyard of secrets, a stretch of land that seems to resist human presence. People go in expecting a hike, a camping trip, a weekend escape. Too often, they don't come back, and when they do, they're not the same. On July 14, 1997, Daniel and Elena signed in at the ranger station before heading onto the Deadwood Ridge Trail. Rangers later noted how cheerful they seemed, Elena carefully studying her map, Daniel joking loudly about hunting Bigfoot to anyone within earshot. No one suspected it would be the last time they were seen alive. Day 1, the pair hiked the main trail without issue. They were spotted by 2 other hikers heading up toward Deadwood Ridge that afternoon. Witnesses recalled Elena stopping to take photos near the creek while Daniel adjusted his pack. Their first camp was set beside running water, the kind of safe, textbook campsite Daniel always insisted upon. Nothing unusual. Day 2. Tracks indicated they veered off the marked path, heading toward the old logging roads deeper in the forest. That choice baffled investigators. Both hikers were experienced enough to know how risky it was to stray off trail. Why did they? Was it curiosity, or did something or someone lead them away? Day 3, unconfirmed. No direct evidence survives, but some locals later claimed to have heard shrieks echoing through the forest that night, unlike any animal they could identify. Searchers would later note strange disturbances near an unmarked logging road, broken branches, heavy impressions in the moss, as though something massive had passed through. Final discovery. Their last campsite was eventually located. What searchers found was chilling. Tents had not been knocked over by wind or torn by wildlife, shredded, not by claws or teeth, but ripped from the inside out, as though someone or something desperately clawed to escape. Their food and supplies were untouched, laid out neatly, as if the hikers expected to return. Their personal belongings were untouched. Wallets, camera, maps all left behind neatly. No blood, no drag marks, no signs of a struggle, no human tracks leaving the camp. And yet, both hikers were gone. Search efforts consisted of dozens of volunteers, rangers, and even military helicopters combing the ridge. Bloodhounds picked up their scent but lost it less than half a mile from camp, as if the trail had simply evaporated. Some that were brought in refused to track further. They whined, circled back, and in one case, a dog lay down and would not move forward, trembling until its handler dragged it away. Helicopters swept the ridge with thermal imaging, but turned up nothing. No heat signatures, no campfires, no movement. Ground teams combed ravines and waterways. Nothing. The forest gave up no bodies, no clothing, no answers. Locals who joined the search claimed they felt watched, reporting moments of eerie silence when even the wind stopped. One volunteer said it was like walking through a church where the forest itself was holding its breath. The search lasted 12 days before officials called it off. The file was closed under missing persons. But here's the part that still unsettles investigators. Why did Daniel and Elena leave the trail? What compelled them to step into an area every map and ranger advised against? Who, or what, tore through their tent walls from the inside, if not them? Why did the dogs refuse to go further, whimpering at invisible boundaries as if something repelled them? And why, in all those long nights of searching, did multiple volunteers swear they heard footsteps pacing just out of sight, always keeping distance, always watching, never showing itself? Was this simply a tragic case of two hikers getting lost? Or did Daniel and Elena stumble into something the forest had been hiding for centuries? And the darkest question of all, did they run from something out there? Or were they taken? When investigators revisited the site of Daniel and Elena's disappearance, the more they looked, the less sense it made. What should have been a simple wilderness accident began to resemble something much darker. The tents weren't just slashed, they were torn outward, as if Daniel and Elena tried to claw their way out in panic. But what were they running from? The ground surrounding the camp was oddly clean. No footprints, no drag marks, no signs of wildlife, almost as if the forest itself erased their exit. Rangers noted the fire pit had been half dug, then abandoned mid-build, as though something interrupted them. Food, clothing, cameras, all untouched. No signs of a robbery, no evidence of animals scavenging. Searchers claimed their radios failed completely near the camp. Batteries drained faster than they should have. Compasses spun erratically. The official records end here. But eyewitnesses, campfire stories, and one disturbing account years later suggest this disappearance was anything but ordinary. The official report eventually reduced the case to a line on a missing persons registry. 2 names, 2 faces. 2 more people were swallowed by Deadwood Ridge. But one detail still disturbs those who were there. Some volunteers swore they found enormous footprints pressed deep into the earth, not far from the site. Prints too large, too wide, too heavy to be human. The report of those tracks never appeared in the official logs. One searcher later said, "They told us to stop asking questions about it. That's when I knew we weren't supposed to know the truth." The official report eventually reduced the case to a line on a missing persons registry. 2 names, 2 faces. 2 more people were swallowed by Deadwood Ridge. But one detail still disturbs those who were there. Some volunteers swore they found enormous footprints pressed deep into the earth not far from the site. prints too large, too wide, too heavy to be human. The report of those tracks never appeared in the official logs. One searcher later said, "They told us to stop asking questions about it. That's when I knew we weren't supposed to know the truth." The disappearance of Daniel and Elena sparked countless theories, some grounded, others unexplainable. None fully answered the question, what happened out there? Skeptics claimed a bear could have been responsible, but there was no blood, no torn clothing, no shredded food, and no bear on record has ever ripped open tents from the inside. The official stance was simple. They strayed from the trail, got lost, and succumbed to the elements. But where were the bodies? Why did bloodhounds lose their scent in an area so small? Why leave behind maps, gear, and water? None of it added up. Some even suggested they stumbled upon something sinister, illegal logging camps, poachers, or even a hidden community living off-grid. But if humans were involved, why leave all valuables behind? Why not stage a struggle? And who could carry two adults away without leaving a single trace? Locals whisper the truth is simpler and far more terrifying. Daniel and Elena crossed into Bigfoot territory. Witnesses claimed they heard tree knocks and inhuman howls in the days after. Some believe the hikers may have captured evidence, photos, recordings, and something didn't want them leaving the ridge alive. Were the torn tents a sign of their final desperate attempt to escape before they were taken? Others argue that Deadwood Ridge itself is the culprit, a place where reality bends. Rangers have privately admitted the forest doesn't follow normal rules. Footsteps that echo when you're standing still, paths that shift behind you, shadows that move even without wind. Could Daniel and Elena have stumbled into something older than any cryptid? A tear between worlds? A predator we don't even have a name for? The most unsettling theory suggests the truth was found and buried. Why were the footprints excluded from reports? Why did radios fail, compasses spin, logs vanish? Some say the ridge is monitored, that rangers know what's out there, and when people go missing, the stories are rewritten to fit a safer narrative. Were Daniel and Elena's deaths part of a larger pattern the public isn't supposed to see? Why did they abandon their fire mid-build? Why did the dogs refuse to follow their scent further into the ridge, whining and retreating as though hitting an invisible wall? What ripped through their tents from the inside, if not them? And why, to this day, does the ridge remain a magnet for disappearances, each case eerily echoing Daniel and Elena's fate? What if the truth isn't that Daniel and Elena vanished? What if they were claimed? For years, Deadwood Ridge held its silence. Official reports were archived, the trail reopened, and the disappearance of Daniel and Elena slowly became just another campfire story. But then, whispers began surfacing, fragmented accounts from locals, hikers, and even former rangers who, for a long time, said nothing out of fear of ridicule or something worse. The Hiker's Journal. In 2003, a hunter stumbled upon a weather-beaten notebook lodged in the hollow of a cedar, less than a mile from where Daniel and Elena's campsite was found. The first pages were normal, gear lists, trail notes, even sketches of animal tracks. But the final entries grew erratic, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Day 2, heard voices in the trees. Thought it was kids, but no one out here. Laughter, echoing. Elena says ignore it. Day 3, something followed us last night. Heavy steps around the tent. When I looked, nothing. The woods went dead silent after. Day 4, voices again, this time calling my name. Sounded like Elena, but she was right next to me. Day 5, tent ripped. Elena screamed. I can't write more. The ranger's confession. In 2009, a retired ranger, speaking under anonymity, admitted he'd seen something during the search he never reported. We were tracking by the creek. I remember it clear as day, big footprints in the mud. But they weren't human, and they weren't bear either. Each print was long, with splayed toes, deeper than any boot. We followed them maybe 30 yards before they just stopped. Like the thing that made them vanished mid-step. They told me to keep my mouth shut, said it would stir panic. He claimed other rangers saw the same, but were ordered to strike it from the record. The local story. A woman from the nearby town of Silvervale finally spoke out in 2016 during a community forum on missing persons. She admitted that on the night of July 15, 1997, she had been camping with her family on the opposite side of Deadwood Ridge. She swore she saw lantern lights, weaving through the trees long past midnight, moving unnaturally fast, too fast to be human. At first I thought it was hikers, but then the lights went up the ridge, straight through the tree line, like they weren't bound to the ground. And then I heard screaming, one long scream cut short. My husband told me to get in the tent and stay quiet. We never told anyone. Who would believe us? A disturbing find. In 2019, 22 years after their disappearance, a group of loggers clearing storm-damaged trees on Deadwood Ridge discovered something wedged in the crook of a Douglas fir, nearly 40 feet off the ground. It was a backpack, sun-bleached and torn, belonging to Daniel Whitaker. Inside, a broken compass, a rusted pocket knife, a pair of cracked glasses matching Daniel's description, and a strip of fabric stained dark with human blood. The blood was later tested. While results were never made public, whispers from within the department suggested it was a mixed profile, two different individuals. The discovery should have brought closure. Instead, it raised more disturbing questions. How did the pack end up in a tree? Why wasn't it found during the original search and rescue operation, which involved helicopters, bloodhounds, and thermal imaging? Was it placed there later? And if so, by who or what? And then there's what the loggers swore to their families. Before pulling the backpack down, they felt the forest go silent, like it was holding its breath. And as they left, one logger claimed he heard a voice call his name. Deep, guttural, not human, yet eerily familiar. Since then, hikers still vanish in the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. Reports echo the same strange details: radios going dead, compasses spinning, eerie laughter at night, and sometimes screams. When word of these accounts trickled out, locals began whispering about the old legends again. The tall one of Deadwood Ridge, a shadow that mimics familiar voices, lures hikers off trail, and leaves nothing behind but shredded camps and silence. If the journal was authentic, then Daniel and Elena were stalked for days before their disappearance. If the ranger was telling the truth, then their predator left no trace of where it went. And if the woman at Silvervale wasn't imagining things, then maybe the hikers didn't vanish at all. Maybe they were taken. But taken by what? And why, nearly 3 decades later, do some nights on Deadwood Ridge still echo with voices calling out from the trees? Could these all be coincidence? Or is there a larger pattern hiding in the dark forests of the Pacific Northwest? Bigfoot encounters are easy to dismiss as hoaxes and folklore. But when disappearances stack up, when personal effects resurface years later in impossible places, and when journals speak of voices and footsteps, how long can we keep calling it a myth? The disappearance of Daniel Whitaker and Elena Price remains one of the most unsettling missing persons mysteries in Oregon wilderness history. At first glance, their case could be chalked up to what happens too often in the Pacific Northwest wilderness: two hikers wandering too far, caught in rough terrain, victims of the unforgiving wild. But the details tell a darker story. The shredded tents, the journal ending mid-sentence, the footprints that stopped mid-stride, as though something lifted them from the ground. These aren't the details of an accident. They're the hallmarks of something the official reports won't name. Skeptics will point to the usual explanations: hypothermia, falls, predators. But those who know Deadwood Ridge, locals, rangers, hunters, speak in whispers about something else. They describe voices calling from the trees, lantern-like lights weaving between the pines, and a sense of being watched by something massive and unseen. And Daniel and Elena weren't the only ones. Their case sits among dozens of other unsolved disappearances in Oregon's national forests, cases eerily similar to those documented in Missing 411. Hunters who never returned, children who vanished within seconds of being seen, campers who disappeared only to have their clothes found neatly folded miles away from where they were last spotted. Could these all be coincidence? Or is there a larger pattern hiding in the dark forests of the Pacific Northwest? Bigfoot encounters are easy to dismiss as hoaxes and folklore. But when disappearances stack up, when personal effects resurface years later in impossible places, and when journals speak of voices and footsteps, how long can we keep calling it a myth? Please like and subscribe for stories like these and more.